Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. It's Trevor here with you today on this episode, along with my guest, Jeff. Now, a quick question to everyone listening. What percentage of your life would you say you spend playing? Yes, playing. No, I mean at work. Yeah. Well, if you're thinking, I don't have time to play, I'm too focused running my business, then keep listening, because Jeff, our guest today, shows individuals and businesses how to tap into their true selves, how to feel their happiest and most fulfilled, all by playing. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? But it's not. Jeff's work's been featured in the New York Times and on CNN, and he's worked with some of the big names like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, to name just a few. So Jeff's a play consultant and an international speaker. Great to have you with us. Welcome, Jeff. Jeff Harry.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
No, it's great. I'm really looking forward to digging into the science of play, or however we coin it. Maybe just to start with, though, share a little bit about your journey, how you got to where you are now, and help people like you do.
Sure. So I'll share the brief Batman origin story. So I don't know if you ever saw the movie Big with Tom Hanks. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
So he got to play with toys for a living. So I saw that in third grade, and I started writing toy companies literally that day. And I just kept writing them for like the next 15 years until I got into the toy industry, and I don't know if you've ever gotten exactly what you wanted and then been so disappointed when you arrive, but that's exactly what I was in the toy industry, and there was no fun, no toys, no high fives, no kids, like just not any fun at all. I'm sitting in this cubicle and I'm wondering why the walls are padded. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I was in New York at the time. I left, came over to the San Francisco Bay Area, and bumped into an organization that was paying $150 a week. I found it on Craigslist, which is this shady site in the US. But they were teaching kids engineering with Lego, and they were basically just playing for a living. And there were 7 people, and it was like a joke of a job. But I was just like, let me just do this for a little bit. And as I was doing it, I was like, wait a minute, I'm getting paid to play. I'm going to make this a thing. So I doubled down on it, and we ended up growing it into the largest Lego-inspired STEM organization in the entire U.S. We taught 100,000 kids a year, about 1 million kids within 10 years. And we did it all by playing. Like, we had no business plan. We had no idea what we were doing. We picked cities we thought were fun. We picked people that we thought were fun. That's what we just experimented all the time, which is play. And we became so large that we got the attention of the companies you mentioned, Facebook, Google, Adobe, PayPal, Netflix. And they were like, hey, do you do team building events? We're like, of course we do. No, we didn't. But we just said yes to everything because we're playing, right? We're just trying stuff out. And for the next decade, I ended up running team building events for the top tech companies in the world. And what I found was at the same time that they talked about innovation, disruption, risk-taking, all those buzzwords, right? In many ways, they weren't actually doing that. And these were the top companies in the world. So I, created Rediscover Your Play to create psychologically safe workspaces to actually take risks, to actually play, and using positive psychology and play to navigate difficult conversations, address inner critic stuff, get your staff in flow, all the things that I realized these companies could do better if they just allowed themselves to play more.
Wow. Yeah. I'm glad you have. Certainly want to dig into that more. So maybe so you mentioned flow. Is that like from the way I've read and experienced flow more? Well, maybe not. No, let me pause that. The way I've read about flow is extreme sports, the Rise of Superman book.
Right.
But I've experienced it more through just being zoned into a certain thing that I want to do.
Right.
Just get lost in time. But is play almost like a quick entry point into flow, or does that depend on certain personality type?
I almost see play as synonymous with flow, because I define play as any joyful act where there is no purpose, there is no result, where you forget about time, where you don't have anxiety about the future, you don't have regrets about the past. You are literally in the moment. You are literally like engaged in flow. And what actually happens when you're playing like an extreme sports, is what's happening in your brain is you're actually going through something called hypnofrontality, where your prefrontal cortex, a part of it actually shuts down. Your inner critic actually gets quiet. And the reason why is because you're making so many decisions and you can't listen to your inner critic at that point, right? It just doesn't fit. So your inner critic actually shuts down and you get this high amount of dopamine. You become highly creative, highly curious. And instead of just being fixated on one result, which a lot of adults get to, right? We're so fixated on one result and expectations of the thief of joy. Instead, you become highly curious and see all of the opportunities in front of you. Right. And then you're more of like in this yes and state. And you felt this way when you've traveled and you're like, yes, I will go and do this. Yes, I will hop on a moped. Yes, I will go to a deserted island. Yes, I will dance under the moonlight. Like you're just like saying yes to everything. And you're in this flow state. And you're actually, when you're in a flow state, you're 5 times more productive. So for business leaders, right, or entrepreneurs that have staff, if you want to figure out how to motivate your staff more, find out what their flow work is. I also refer to it as zone of genius, which Gay Hendricks refers to it as, or your ikigai, like your reason or purpose. Because when you help people actually get into flow, boost in morale, boost in productivity, lower turnover, all of these things are happening because you're helping your staff get into flow. And the easiest way in which to figure that out with your staff is just to ask them, what is the work that you love to do most? What is the work where you forget about time? What is the work where if I wasn't paying you, you would still do this work? That is their zone of genius work. And the more you can actually have them do that, the more appreciative they are of you, because they're like, oh man, you actually care about what I want to do? Oh, that's amazing. And then it actually has a ripple effect on the rest of their work.
Yeah. Okay. So how would a company or a business owner listening thinking, right, okay, this is a new strategy, willing to give it a go, how would they introduce play in like a structured way? And I use the word structure kind of tentatively because that sounds less fun and less playful, right, and more business-like. But how could they start that process?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is, do you have a psychologically safe workspace? Because you can't play if you don't. If there's not built-in trust within the team, psychologically safe teams produce at an exponential level than anyone else. So how do you know if you have a psychologically safe workspace? Ask your staff, is there anything that you are uncomfortable asking me, right? What is the behavior that is horrible, that is still tolerated? Right, you can always tell what's the worst, what the culture of an organization is based off of the worst behavior. Is someone getting favoritism? Is there a toxic person at work that no one is addressing? So you got to do all of those things. You got to do that legwork first. Are we able to have difficult conversations? Can I ask my boss? Can I ask my staff to do anything? And can they ask anything of me? If you do all of that stuff, then you have a space where you can play. But if you try to force play, if you try to force fun, oh, that's the worst. Like you've been there. You've been at those team building events where you're like, listen, Samantha's going to hate Chad regardless of whether they play bingo together or they escape a room. They still hate each other because of all the animosity from the past. So we have to mediate that conversation first. And then after that, then we can play. And then there's many different ways in which to do it. It could be simply being like, hey, let's approach this project a different way. I'm open to anyone's suggestions. Let's do it in a drastically different way. Hey, when we have a meeting, instead of us doing a brainstorming meeting in the office, in a box room, around a box table for an hour, let's figure out a more creative way to do it. If we're all on Zoom, let's all go walking while we're doing it. Everyone's on their phone and walking. Just try. Play's about experimentation. It's about being curious, and it's about, testing what might work, because the reality is, in the post-pandemic world, if you're not experimenting and you're not playing, you're going to be obsolete. Stephen Johnson says the future is where people are having the most fun. Look at the companies that thrived during 2020, the Disney Pluses, Hulu, TikTok, Clubhouse. All these are experimentating, organizations. Think about it. Even Google, when they first started, they were experimenting. So we have to show up with that level of like curious growth mindset in order to thrive in the post-pandemic world. And if you're going to try to do pre-pandemic planning, ooh, man, if you're trying to go back to normal, you're done, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think leaders of organizations, entrepreneurs, everyone listening, it really is. We hear the word pivot, but it's coming out of that with a completely different mindset, isn't it? It's like almost starting from scratch. Like, what do we want to be, regardless of what we were? If we're still here.
How do you want people to show back up to the office? Even the question of when people are supposed to show back up to the office. Do you force your staff to come back? Is that a good strategy? Are more people productive at home? Can you figure it out? Like, can you instead make it so that people would want to go back to the office once we like deal with this, when everyone is vaccinated and everyone feels safe to go back? Or do you just tell everyone, like in this dictatorial way, everyone now needs to go back? Even just the way in which you're doing that can be either done in a playful way or a perfection way. And I talk a lot about how play is the opposite of perfection. Perfection is rooted in shame and ego and worried about failing all the time, right? While play is curiosity, experimentation, and frankly, failing all the time. And if you think about it, one of my former colleagues used to work on the Mars rover, and her main job was to make that rover fail as much as possible on Earth. Like, that was her job, because they needed to have it fail in 20,000 ways and figure out how to fix it while it was on Earth, because when they sent it to Mars, that's 1.5 million miles, or maybe even larger, I think 150 million miles away. We need to know when it fails over there that we've done our due diligence to figure out all the failures. I don't think us as companies, the companies that thrive the most are the most willing to constantly experiment, constantly fail, because they then are more likely to be pushing the envelope while everyone else is playing it way too safe. Yeah,
you're right. It's having the courage to be innovative, isn't it, in different ways, incorporating play amongst other different approaches as well.
It also makes your staff more resilient, because then when they actually fail, it's not that big of a deal. But for a company that's trying to be perfect all the time, when they fail, everyone panics. People start thinking about leaving. Other people start like backstabbing each other. That's not a psychologically safe space. But if you're able to be like, we're going to work on this project. I mean, and here's a perfect example. If you're like, well, this kind of sounds like all happy and whatever it is, but like, does this really work? If you look at Google's 20% rule, they have a rule where they gave their staff a fifth of their time to actually pursue the things that interest them, to pursue their curiosity, to pursue their play, as long as it helped Google out. And what came from that program? Google Meet, Google Maps, Google News, Gmail, so many of the things that we use, so many of the foundational parts of Google were from giving people the freedom to pursue their curiosity and pursue their play.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, actually, is there like a magic ratio of kind of play to work?
I think it's up to the organization, right? Like, I tell this to people all the time. Why do we have an 8-hour workday? Where does the 8-hour workday even come from? In the US, we actually work 8.8 hours of the day. But studies have found that most people can only do their deep work, like quality work, for maybe 2 hours and 51 minutes of a given 8-hour workday. So what in the world are people doing for 5.8 hours of the day, at least in the US? Stupid emails, wasteful meetings, so many wasteful meetings, so many reports. Like, how many people do you know working on reports, communicating the work that they're doing? So they're not even doing the work. They're doing work, telling people about the work they're doing. There's so many like BS jobs out there and wasteful time. And if you know that you can only get 3 to 4 really quality hours out of your staff a day, what is the work that you'd want them to do? obviously the work that they thrive, their zone of genius work. You don't want them doing work that they're just like average at, because if you asked your staff, like, okay, what do you love to do most? Oh, I love talking with clients. Okay, what percentage of time do you talk to clients? Only 15% of the time? Like, that's revenue being lost, right? How can we increase that from 15 to 20 or 25%? We're talking about maybe 1 to 2, 3 more hours a week, right? If you're able to do that, it's going to increase that person's, actual revenue, right? As well as make them more productive, as well as give you the opportunity to figure out what they can actually do, because then you're giving them more freedom to like show, their strengths. And you're like, oh man, you should be talking to more of our clients. Let me give you like 20% more of our clients. And let's just have you do that work. Yeah. While someone that loves to do the detailed oriented back end, the accounting, the invoicing, whatever it is that, especially for solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, that like have really tiny staffs, you got to make sure that you're maximizing the staff that you actually hire.
Yeah, it's so easy to get into boxes, isn't it? Categories of this is what needs to happen. You're the only one around. You need to do it. It doesn't help, does it? It really doesn't.
And even asking a solopreneur that's like, oh man, I wish I could do that, but it sounds great, but I don't have time. Look at all of the work that you do. Identify what's your flow work, right? Or as Gay Hendricks refers to it, as your zone of genius. You have your stuff, you have your zone of incompetence, things that you suck at, zone of competence, things you're average at, zone of excellence. This is where a lot of people spend a ton of their time. It's things you're really good at, but you don't really care to do it either way. You just happen to be good at it. That's usually what we get paid to do. But your zone of genius is your ikigai. It's the stuff where you forget about time. It's the stuff you excel at. As a solopreneur, you should look at, okay, what is my zone of genius work? What's my ikigai? What's my flow work? Okay, what percentage of time am I doing that work? If I did more of that work, could I bring in more revenue to actually pay someone to do a bunch of my accounting, to actually do a bunch of my books? Because like maybe that's not where you thrive. You thrive in like working with the customer. And right now you're stuck doing QuickBooks all the time. And you're like, this is sucking my soul.
Yeah, it really is. It takes courage, doesn't it, to embrace the thought of play within the work structure mindset, in a sense. Partly, I think, because like, would we really be taken seriously if word gets out that our staff, play, or we've introduced play and that sort of stuff? I know there's science that helps people get into the flow. There's evidence that play does that. But is there a way that businesses can, I guess, communicate that in a positive way without almost being laughed at?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of tech companies hate when I talk about play, but they love when I talk about flow because there's so many studies behind it, right?
Yeah.
When you're actually also in flow, Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, the positive psychologist that studies this the most, he's also known as the doctor of flow, talks about how he has this flow chart where when you're in flow, well, here, let's break down the flow chart, right? When you're not good at a task, right? When you don't have a lot of experience at a task and you just started, just kind of like when you start a new job, you have a lot of anxiety because you don't know what you're doing. You're like, oh my gosh, I started this new job or I started this new business. I have no idea what I'm doing. Anxiety all the time. When you've been doing work for so long and you're really good at it and the challenge is gone, then you're bored, right? So between anxiety and boredom is the flow channel. It's the flow state. And that's when the challenge specifically meets the skill level perfectly. So the more you can actually figure out your staff doing that, the more productive they are, the more money is made. When you can get your staff in flow, that is when you're thriving. That's when you have psychologically safe workspaces. That's when people are willing to work overtime and maybe not even get paid for it because they just love the work that they're doing. So whenever I talk about that, I talk about when has your staff been in flow, or when have you been in? You're like, oh man, I could work for like 10, 12 hours. But when you are forcing it, oh man, you're like done after 2 hours. You're like, I just don't want to be here anymore. and we have to think also, we're at work. If you're working 50 hours a week, 50 weeks out of the year, at least that's what we do in the US, that's 2,500 hours, right? 2,500 hours. Are those productive hours? Are those flow hours? Or are those really unproductive looking for new job hours?
Yeah.
Most times, I think there was a Gallup poll that was done worldwide that found that 85% of people are disengaged at work. So you have to be looking right now at your staff and being like, how many of them are disengaged? How many of them are mailing it in right now? So, because if that's the case, you have nothing to lose by playing, right? Because they're already disengaged to begin with. This actually will help you more than if you choose to continue to be serious and run it the right way, right? Because what is the right way, especially in the post-pandemic world? Whatever, the way in which you used to do marketing, probably not going to work as well, going forward. The way in which you did recruiting may not work as well post-pandemic. All the things that you thought were the right way may not be that anymore. So you have to be in the world of experimentation or play, or you're just going to become the next Blockbuster.
Yeah. It also ties in with personal growth, isn't it? Developing yourself, developing your people, the leaders in the organization, your staff, your teams, because growth always requires change, doesn't it? So we're always constantly learning and adapting. And as you mentioned, we're failing. A lot of the time we fail our way to success, don't we? That's where we learn the most. And it sounds to me like incorporating the play element in the right way for whatever business it fits, or the way that it would fit in a business.
Yeah, and you can even incorporate it into things that are really challenging, right? Like a lot of the workshops that we run, we run one on navigating difficult conversations. How do you mediate between two people? How do you mediate between you and one of your clients, right? Are you asking enough? Are you asking for your worth when you're negotiating with clients? You can practice that. You can actually practice how to have that conversation. I think we were talking, earlier about football, right? Reeds United. But if you think about football, right? They practice all week. They practice for much of the week in order to play the game, and the game is only like what, an hour and a half? Like really super short, 90 minutes. Yeah. So, but in work, we never get to practice. We never get to practice having difficult conversations. We never get to practice how to manage. How many people right now, and I ask clients all this, how many people have you promoted to the next job simply because they were good at the last job? But you don't know if they're good leaders. You don't know if they know how to, they've maybe never managed in their life, and now you've put them in this position, and they've never got into practice how to run a meeting, mediate a conversation, how to manage other people. We need more time practicing, and that's what play gives you. It gives you that opportunity to try something out and be like, okay, maybe that doesn't work. Let's try this out. Maybe that doesn't work, and actually be okay with it. Because I think a lot of businesses claim that they are like, hey, we care about failure. We want you to fail and keep trying. And then no, they don't. They'll fire you in the first spot. So you have to, if you're a leader listening to this, do you actually give your staff the freedom to fail, or do they have to be perfect all the time? And if so, how is that preventing them and preventing your company from growing in ways that it needs to grow?
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, it's the role of the leader, the organization, the business head, the entrepreneur is a lot more. It's setting the environment, isn't it? Like the psychologically safe environment that people can kind of share ideas to start with. They can raise concerns or call you out if your behavior as a leader is not as it should be. They feel that they're safe enough to do that without suddenly getting sacked.
And let's say we're talking about sales, right? And playing in sales. Well, I've been cold calling people. How's that working out for you? Oh, it's been really low. Why don't you hop on Clubhouse? Why don't you actually start, networking with people and connecting with them and showing your worth before you actually pitch them? Why don't you hop on LinkedIn and study what people are talking about and start to build a relationship with them in their comments and in discussion before you pitch to them. Like, there's so many ways in which we can experiment that I think we don't, because we're like, well, this is the way I've always done it. Why? Why, if it's just the way you've always done it, would you continue to do it that way, even if it's still sort of working? Because you know that's just going to end. You can't cold call 300 people, with a 3% success rate and like be sustainable, because people are going to quit after a while, because salespeople hate getting rejected like that. So you got to figure out a new creative way to actually approach your work.
Yeah. And also, if you haven't built the culture where, they have found their zone of genius and they're able to express it, they're already looking for other jobs, aren't they? Like you said,
right.
They're not going to hang around. The flip side of that then is you get a culture and a buzz going with certain organizations that, hey, they are innovative. They do allow creativity and, play is part of how they express that. It's going to draw and attract more people, isn't it? It's just, you're going to want to be around that. Fun is contagious, isn't it? It just, if it's in the work,
it absolutely is. It's what the Stephen Johnson quote I said earlier, right? People gravitate towards fun, right? And money gravitates fun. Hello, I mean, come on, let's be honest. Like, you want to be working with the organizations like the TikToks and the Clubhouse, because that's where all of the attention is right now, right? And if you are trying to be perfect or trying to emulate someone else instead of trying to figure out and be self-aware of how do you want to show up, how do we want to, like, I always ask this, every company that started off playing, right? Google, when they were in Sergey, when he was in his garage, was like, had the audacity to be like, hey, can we connect the world through a search engine? Even Bezos, before he became whatever he became, it, like, back in 1999 when he was running Amazon, all of the top tech heads wanted to hang out with Bezos simply because he was taking on the most interesting challenges in tech at the time. So he was just getting really smart people that were willing to work for almost free because he was exploring the most interesting aspects of technology, of the internet, right? Like, no one was thinking like that. So that is the approach that want to be a part of. They don't want to be a part of something where you're just trying to be like everyone else. Stop trying to emulate somebody. Stop trying to emulate Gary Vaynerchuk or Phil Knight or whoever, the Virgin Atlantic guy, because like their approach may not work for you. And frankly, their approach also may be obsolete. Like, I think we way too much of the time emulate, a lot of toxic people, the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos. But like, I'm sorry, those organizations that are thriving now, that toxicity is going to come back to haunt them.
Yeah. Toxic culture, it never ends well, does it? If you don't deal with it. I mean,
it may make a lot of money in the short term and a lot of money for people that own that stock, but in the long term, it usually just fizzles out.
Yeah. This is really good. We are approaching the end of our conversation for today. Time's going already, but one of the things I wanted to kind of get your perspective on your help on really is just with regards to teams. I know you go in businesses, you help teams start the whole process of working together and make it a healthy environment. Is there a quick, I know it's too long of an answer to really justify here, but just any quick tips for people that maybe, what I'm thinking is people turn up to say the team meeting, the staff meeting, and everybody walks slowly towards the meeting room because it's not fun. If you just suddenly think, right, let's all start it with a game, people are going to think, what's going on? This is a bit strange.
Right.
Someone's lost the plot. But are there kind of techniques other than like the odd icebreaker? Is there a way? And I guess this builds into culture. But
again, don't force fun, right? If you're not ready, don't do that. But there's a lot of things you can do at a meeting, right? You can actually positively prime the meeting before the meeting starts. So a lot of people don't know this, but whoever speaks first when people are coming in actually changes the whole meeting. So if you're like talking about like something great that happened during the weekend or your kids or something positive, studies show that the meeting's actually more productive. If people are complaining to start the meeting, it reduces the productivity of the meeting. So anyone can positively prime the meeting. So as the leader, get there early and just start positively priming it. That's an easy way to create a psychologically safe place. Another thing you can do at meetings, you're like, hey, these meetings have been super dull recently. Call them out and just be like, yo, what can we do to make them better? How about this? This is a really good idea. Stop the meeting when it's done. The meeting doesn't have to be 60 minutes. Why do we even make it 60? It can be 7 minutes. It can be 22 minutes. Don't waste people's time. Don't have a meeting if it's not necessary. If this is a meeting between two people and you're bringing the whole staff, you're wasting their time. But another way of creating a psychologically safe space is be like, look, I don't want to waste any of your time anymore. I realize we have a lot of meetings. I don't want to waste that time anymore. Let's talk about what is a productive meeting, what is not, right? When we do a brainstorming meeting, how would you like to do it? How would it work better for all of you? Like, have that open discussion. Hey, right now, is there anything that any of you are uncomfortable telling me? Oh, really? There is? Well, let's not talk about it right now, but I want you to come to me separately and let's actually talk about this. Because until we address all of the underlying issues, you can't be like, hey, everybody, let's be happy today, especially when you don't know what's happening with people. The other suggestion that I do, and I recommend to do this before meetings, as a leader, do you know your staff's languages of appreciation, right? Like it's languages of love, but for the workplace, right? Is it quality time? If it's quality time, that means when was the last time you had like lunch with one of your staff? Even over Zoom, you could do that. Is it acts of service? When was the last time you went to your staff and were like, hey, take Friday off? I got this. I know things are going on with you back at home. Hey, I got your back. Is it gifts? A lot of people like money. Do you know that instead of giving your bonus at the end of the year, if you spread out that same amount of bonus, but throughout the year, you take that $10,000 and you give it out as like $300 or $500 or $1,000. Every time that staffer does something really well, it actually makes them more productive. Same amount of money, right? So, we have to think about all of this. Like, is it words of affirmation? I did this with a staffer where we would not only give him praise internally, but we would let the other departments know how awesome this person was. And when he needed a recommendation for another job, I was like, I'm more than happy to give that to him. He ended up going to that other job, not liking it and coming back because he knew that we appreciated him more here. So again, we have to think about what are their languages of appreciation? How are we giving to our staff? How are we giving a chance for our staff to do their flow work? And the more you do that, the more likely they're going to be much more truthful, much more honest, much more productive, and less likely to leave. And then the meetings are just going to automatically be better.
Yeah, absolutely. People will be running to the meetings rather than
avoiding them like the plague.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That there's so much in what you've shared just in this short time with us that people can take so much away and just implement it gradually, isn't it? It's a process, as you say. Don't try it all at once, freak everybody out, but be intentional yourself, isn't it? It really is. It's the leaders, the business owners, first and foremost, being innovative, having a courageous mindset, really, of trying something new, looking after the people, make sure that they understand that there's trust, there's a safety and a security there to be expressive.
And see your business as an experiment, right? Yeah. We're constantly experimenting. And with experimenting, like, failure is just one of the steps to actually get where you actually want to get to. Yeah. And I think a lot of times, I tell this also to staff, and a lot of leaders, when was the last time you were bored? And you're like, what are you talking about? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm so busy. If you give yourself like 5 minutes, right? Or heck, even 30 minutes a day where you're not inundating yourself with social media, where you're not binge watching Netflix, where you're not looking at email, and you actually just allow yourself to get quiet, that's when your best ideas come out.
Yeah.
That's when like your most creative, exciting, ones that also are scary you, but you're like, oh my gosh, should we change the business? Oh, should I reach out to that client I've been wanting to reach out to for the last 6 months? You start to hear like these crazy risk-taking ideas, but the more you're willing to be like, hey, let me just try that. Who cares if you fail or not? Because the reality is then you're more likely to push yourself into that uncertain mode, right? You're willing to be in the deep end of the pool. And that's where all the innovation lies. That's where all the creativity lies. That's where all the thought leaders that you emulate sit, because they're constantly testing things out and trying out the new thing. And the more you can give yourself the leeway to try that out, even if you fail, or it doesn't really matter what the result is, the more likely you're going to create something that's never been created before. And then you'll probably do really well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting to that point where we can express ourselves fully, isn't it? In the right sort of channeled way. And having the environment where that is then utilised within the mix of, the risk of, if we fail, let's make sure that, failure can be minimised to some extent, can't it? The fallout of failure can be minimised. Right. But even then, it's like, if nobody tries anything new, you're never going to find out if it works or not.
Yeah. And also, if 2020 taught you anything, nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody knows. Even the best thought leaders, you saw them scrambling, Gary Vaynerchuk, Simon Sinek, all of them, they had no clue what they were doing. So they're making it up just as we are. Yeah. So why do we emulate them or be like, oh, they know the let me buy one more course from them and then I'll know. No, dude, experiment, figure it out for yourself. You have all the answers that you need, and you simply need to play enough in order to figure them out.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been really good. Thank you for sharing your expertise, your insight. It's been fun, but also it's really helpful as well. Hopefully everybody listening is going to go and buy some toys or think of games that they can slowly start to implement. Maybe it starts at home first, doesn't it? It starts with us.
Right.
How do we approach play? Are we relaxed enough to do that, or are we too stressed about trying to get it right and trying to come across properly?
And one of the best ways in which to play, because you don't have to buy toys or anything like that, one of the best ways you can play is simply allow yourself to get bored and identify what is that thing that gets you both really excited and really nervous, and do that. And if they want one other way to play, here, I tell this to my clients all the time. Reach out to either 3 to 5 of your closest clients, right? Or 3 to 5 of your closest friends and ask them these 2 questions. What value do I bring? Right? Like, what value do I bring as a business, or what value do I bring to this friendship? Like, what value do I bring to your life? Right? And then second, when have you seen me most alive? And what I mean by that is, like, when have you seen me most creative, most playful, most myself? It's based off the Howard Thurman quote of, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is for more people to come alive. So what value to bring to my life, and when have you seen me come most alive? When you get the answers, oh man, the patterns that form, the ideas that show up, all the play ideas, and then you go back out to those 3 to 5 clients or friends and be like, help me to play more in these ways, could have a dramatic effect on your business. And then all of a sudden you'll find yourself playing more and just kicking more ass.
Yeah, and actually enjoying more of the process, isn't it?
Exactly, which then in turn makes you want to work more, right? Yeah. So, it just feeds itself.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really good. So how can people touch base with you? Is there your website, or what would be the best way for them?
Yeah, sure. The best way is simply go to rediscoveryourplay.com, click on the Let's Play button in the top right-hand corner, where I have a bunch of play ideas that you can implement right now, and then connect with me, because we can set up a call and we can talk about how you can infuse more play so that you can do better in this post-pandemic world and start kicking some ass.
Absolutely. Okay, no, that sounds really good. Thank you again for your time. It's been amazing. It'd be great if you can come back at some point as well and elaborate more on teamwork and all of that sort of stuff. I think it's fascinating. But yeah, we need to wrap it up for now. But for everybody listening, don't let this go to waste. Actually start putting things into practice. You can do it. You'll come more alive the more you express yourself, the more you find out ways your team can express themselves as well. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to them as well. They'll be more productive. They'll want to stay. They'll look forward to coming to work rather than just clocking in, doing the hours, clocking out. I mean, yeah, there's got to be more to life than that. So definitely do something like that. Follow Jeff, find him on his website, see how he can help you further as well. And we will catch you on the next episode. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.